have always been the responsible one in my family. Not in a smug, I'm better than you way, but in the exhausting, I was parentified as a teen and now I handle everything way. I'm the one who remembers birthdays, files paperwork on time, and actually reads contracts before signing them. I was the kid who balanced a checkbook before I could drive, and the adult who saved every bonus check instead of blowing it on a new car. My brother Charlie is the opposite. He's charismatic, loud, fun at parties, the kind of guy who always has the newest phone, the flashiest sneakers, and tickets to whatever event everyone is buzzing about. He's not a bad person, per se, but he's impulsive to the point of self-sabotage. If money burns a hole in pockets, then Charlie's whole wardrobe is smoldering. For context, I live in a mid-sized city where the cost of living is decent if you know how to manage yourself. I worked my way up in finance. Yes, I'm the cliche, good with money sibling. And after years of grinding, I was able to buy a small condo. It's nothing Instagram influencer fancy, but it's mine. Paid down responsibly with an actual budget because I planned for it. Charlie also lives in the same city with his wife, Marissa, and their 2 little girls. His household income isn't astronomical, but it's more than enough to comfortably cover a mortgage, bills, childcare, and still have some fun. If he and Marissa actually stuck to a budget, they'd be fine. Problem is, Charlie thinks budgeting is a restriction instead of a tool. His idea of planning is, if he wants something, he buys it, and future Charlie will somehow figure it out. Guess who future Charlie always turns to when reality comes knocking? Yep, me. It started small, years ago. An emergency here, a surprise bill there. I didn't think much of it at the time. He had young kids, and I figured, I don't have dependents, I can help him bridge the gap. But the emergencies kept happening. Suddenly, I was getting calls about his mortgage, his car payment, even his grocery runs when he'd already dropped hundreds on a new TV for the kids. Meanwhile, I was quietly cutting back on my own life, passing on vacations, driving a beat-up car, scaling back dinners out, because I was funneling money into Charlie's chaos. To be clear, I make plenty. I'm not hurting, but it's not about whether I could help. It's about how, every time I bailed him out, I had to sacrifice something of mine that I'd worked for. And every time I did it, Charlie treated it less like a lifeline and more like a guarantee. I kept telling myself I was doing it for my nieces. I adore those girls. If buying groceries or covering a bill meant they didn't go without, then I could live with that. But over time, the resentment started to simmer. Because when I'd show up with a check, Charlie wouldn't look embarrassed or grateful. He'd look entitled, like this was just part of our deal. Like I owed it to him because I was the sibling who had more. And the setting here is key. Charlie lives in a nice house, drives a decent car, takes trips with his buddies, buys the newest gadgets. He's not struggling, he's reckless. And I, the responsible one, was becoming his safety net. A couple months back, I went over to Charlie's house for dinner. Marissa had invited me. She's sweet, and she always tries to keep the peace when Charlie and I butt heads. I love spending time with my nieces, so I said yes without thinking twice. Walking into their house, though, was jarring. The first thing I noticed when I stepped into the foyer was the shoes. Rows of them, neatly lined up. Fresh sneakers in every shade of neon, glossy leather loafers, and boots that screamed not from the clearance rack. I stood there towing off my scuffed-up flats and couldn't help wondering, did my last emergency transfer pay for these? Then came the living room reveal. It was like walking into a showroom. Gone was the old sectional that sagged in the middle, replaced with a pristine cream-colored sofa that looked like it had never seen a juice box or a toddler meltdown. A gleaming chandelier hung above the dining table like a crystal crown, refracting the light in a way that felt almost mocking. And the pièce de résistance? An 80-inch flat screen mounted to the wall, so massive it looked like it could double as a drive-in theater. I stood there, mouth half open, and tried to remember the frantic phone call from just 3 weeks earlier. Charlie, panicking because his mortgage payment was too tight this month. The same mortgage payment I'd covered while eating ramen noodles for dinner. And now here I was, staring at a luxury showroom, disguised as a family home. Charlie sauntered in wearing a shirt I immediately recognized as cashmere. I know cashmere because I've looked at it 100 times online before sighing. closing the tab and buying polyester blends instead. Cashmere doesn't just show up in someone's wardrobe. Cashmere is a choice, a pricey one. "Hey, sis," he said, grinning, as if we weren't both silently aware that my bank account had been his personal ATM for months. I hugged him because he's my brother and I do love him, but inside I was seething. Every shiny new thing my eyes landed on felt like a taunt. The sofa. The chandelier. The giant TV that could probably display the pores on an actor's face from across the street. All I could think was, what did I pay for this time? Which of these luxuries is stamped with invisible ink that says, "Funded by Big Sis," on the tag? Dinner itself was fine. Marissa cooked, the kids were adorable, and we all laughed over dessert. But I couldn't shake it. I'd glance at the chandelier overhead, then at my niece asking for a second slice of cake, and this wave of bitterness would hit me. Because while I adored them, every last one of them, I couldn't ignore the gnawing truth. My sacrifices were subsidizing Charlie's recklessness. And sitting in that beautiful, newly furnished house, I realized I wasn't just bailing him out anymore. I was funding his lifestyle. When I got back home that night, I kicked off my shoes and just stood in the middle of my condo, taking it all in. My place isn't fancy, but it's mine, and I've always been proud of that. Still, after seeing Charlie's house, I couldn't help comparing. My TV? A 55-inch I bought a few years back. It's not wall-swallowing massive, but it's perfectly fine. I watch my shows, stream movies, and never once have I thought, you know what this needs? 25 more inches? But compared to the monster in Charlie's living room, mine looked like a travel-sized version. My sofa? A sturdy mid-range piece I bought 7 years ago. It's got a couple of scratches from my cat and a faint coffee stain on one armrest that I never quite managed to scrub out. But it's comfortable. It's where I read, nap, binge watch, and unwind. It's lived in. Real. Still, sitting on it after lounging in Charlie's gleaming, showroom-perfect couch made me think, what would it be like to have upgraded? The ceiling fan above me? It's been here since before I moved in. A little outdated, maybe, but it keeps me cool in the summer and circulates the heat in the winter. Works like a champ. Meanwhile, Charlie had a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a palace. Even my shoes caught my eye when I went to put them away. They're old, sure, but not falling apart. Comfortable, reliable, not embarrassing. Charlie's foyer looked like a sneakerhead's gallery. Mine looked like normal adult footwear. And that's when the resentment really began to pulse. Because I realized Charlie's life looked flashier than mine, but only because I was quietly underwriting it. I sat down at my dining table, pulled out a notepad, and started crunching numbers. It wasn't hard. I know where every dollar goes. I wrote out each loan and emergency transfer from the last 2 years. Then I tallied them up. The total made my stomach drop. That number staring back at me wasn't just digits. It was a better car. Mine's still running, but I've been nursing it along for years. It was the vacation I've been dreaming of, but kept telling myself I couldn't justify. It was a new sofa, a chandelier if I wanted one. Hell, even a wardrobe refresh that included cashmere without guilt. It was everything I didn't buy for myself because I was too busy covering for Charlie. And for the first time, instead of just feeling like a good sister, I felt used. Not by my nieces, not by Marissa, but by Charlie, the guy who knew I'd always cave and spent like a king while I tightened my belt. That night, I closed my notebook and made myself a promise. I was going to put an end to this. The very next day, I couldn't shake the math I'd done the night before. Every number was burned into my brain. The total I'd given him, the vacations I'd skipped, the car repairs I'd postponed, the clothes I'd never bought. It sat on my chest like a weight, and I knew if I didn't deal with it now, I'd just keep stewing until the next emergency rolled in. So I called Charlie and told him I needed to talk. No kids around, no Marissa, just us. When I got to his house, he looked uneasy, like maybe he already sensed what was coming. He ushered me into the kitchen, and we stood there in the same house I'd mentally priced out the night before. The chandelier above the dining table glinted at me like it was in on the secret. I started carefully. "Charlie, we need to talk about the money." His face stiffened. "What money?" I gave him a look. He sighed, dropped the act, and muttered, "Okay, yeah. What about it?" I pulled in a deep breath. "I can't keep doing this. I can't keep shedding my own budget so you can keep living like this." I've been bailing you out for years, and it's not sustainable. Not for me, and not for you." Charlie's jaw clenched. He looked toward the living room where Marissa was tidying up, and the kids were giggling on the couch. He lowered his voice quickly. "Don't embarrass me in front of them, okay? They don't need to know." That lit a fire in me. He was more worried about looking bad than about the fact that he'd been draining me dry. I leaned in, matching his hushed tone but with steel in my voice. "This isn't about embarrassment. This is about reality. I'm not your safety net anymore. I'm not going to keep covering your bills while you play the big shot. You have more than enough money to provide for your family." "You just refuse to budget." His eyes flashed. "You're seriously cutting me off? After everything? You know I've been counting on you." I crossed my arms. "That's exactly the problem, Charlie. You shouldn't be counting on me. You should be counting on yourself. Your wife thinks everything's fine. Your kids think everything's fine, but it's not fine. You've been living above your means and leaning on me to keep the illusion alive." He opened his mouth to argue, but I cut him off. "No more transfers, no more checks, no more guilt trips. I'm done. You need to make a budget, stick to it, and be the provider your family deserves, because I'm not going to bankroll your lifestyle anymore." For once, Charlie didn't have a snappy comeback. He just stared at me, red creeping up his neck, fists tightening at his sides. I didn't wait for him to blow up. I grabbed my bag, turned on my heel, and left him standing in his fancy kitchen under that damn chandelier. I walked out with my heart pounding, but for the first time in years, I felt lighter. I was halfway to the door when Charlie called after me, his voice sharp with bitterness. "You can buy yourself a condo, but you can't help me with my mortgage?" That stopped me cold. My hand froze on the doorknob. I turned back slowly, and the look on his face told me he already regretted saying it. But the words were out there, hanging in the air, and something in me just snapped. "You think my condo is some kind of lottery prize I stumbled into?" I shot back. My voice was low, but shaking with fury. "Charlie, I worked for that. I planned for that. I scraped and saved and said no to myself for years so I could finally have something of my own. And do you want to know something? With all the money I've given you, I could have bought that condo outright. No mortgage, no debt, just mine, free and clear. But instead, I've been carrying your mortgage right along with mine." He flinched, but I wasn't finished. "I've cut back on vacations, on eating out, on clothes, on my car. I've sat at home with instant ramen while you were out buying 80-inch TVs and designer sneakers. I've looked at cashmere sweaters in store windows and told myself, not this year, you need to help Charlie instead. And then I come over here and see you strutting around in cashmere under a chandelier that probably cost more than my entire living room set, and you have the audacity to call me selfish?" His face was pale now, his mouth opening and closing like he wanted to speak, but couldn't find words. "I've been more of a provider for your family than you have, and that ends today. I won't be your safety net anymore. You have a good job. You make good money. You just need to stop acting like a kid who thinks his paycheck is a toy allowance. So here it is, loud and clear. No more money. Not now. Not ever." I took a step closer, staring him down. "Figure it out, Charlie. Be the husband and father your family deserves. Because I'm done." The room was silent, except for the muffled sound of the kids laughing in the living room. Charlie looked like he regretted his words, like he wanted to take them back, but pride clamped his jaw shut. He couldn't muster anything. I turned, opened the door, and walked out without another word. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like Charlie's keeper. I felt free. Passed after that blow-up with Charlie. At first, there was silence. No calls, no texts, not even the usual family memes he'd send at random hours. Part of me worried about my nieces, whether they were going without. But when I saw Marissa posting pictures of family game nights and school events, everyone smiling and well-fed, I knew they were fine. And truthfully, I was fine too. Better, even. I had space in my budget again. I could buy fresh groceries without guilt. I replaced a few worn-out things around the condo. I even let myself take a small weekend trip out of town, something I hadn't done in years. Every purchase, every little indulgence, reminded me that I wasn't secretly bankrolling someone else's choices anymore. Then, one evening, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Charlie standing there. He looked different. Not flashy, not grinning ear to ear like always, just tired, humbled. "Hey," he said, shifting awkwardly. I let him in. We sat down and he cut straight to it. "I wanted to tell you, you were right about everything." He explained that after I cut him off, he'd finally sat down and faced his finances head on. He started budgeting, tracking expenses, cutting back. At first it was rough, but then something clicked. He admitted, almost sheepishly, that it wasn't nearly as impossible as he'd always told himself. But then he dropped the part that stung and softened me all at once. He still hadn't told Marissa. To save face, he blamed slowed work contracts for their cutbacks. He said he couldn't stand the idea of her knowing just how much he'd leaned on me. "I'm not proud of that," he said quietly. "But I'm working on it. And I needed to say I'm sorry for putting you in that position, for taking advantage." I nodded. There wasn't much to say. He'd finally admitted the truth I'd been screaming for years. That was enough. After a while, he stood, thanked me again, and left. It wasn't until I was cleaning up later that I saw it. An envelope sitting on the coffee table, my name written across the front in his handwriting. Beneath it, 2 words, "First payment." I opened it, and inside was a stack of bills, $5,000. I sat down hard on the couch, staring at it. My brother, who once called me cheap and selfish for refusing to cover his mortgage, had just left me an envelope of cash, like a debt finally being acknowledged. I didn't know if he'd ever be able to pay me back fully. Honestly, I didn't need him to. The envelope wasn't about the money. It was about accountability, about him finally recognizing the weight he'd dumped on me for years. And for the first time in a long time, I felt not just free, but vindicated.